To make this Christmas stocking pattern, you're going to need a few supplies. All supplies will be linked below, as well as a link to the pattern where you can go and get that. To assemble the Christmas stocking, you're going to lay one main stocking piece on top of the other one, right sides together. Line them up as best you can and pin them on all sides, excluding the top. Sew the sides and bottom with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, leaving the top open. If you're using a fabric that's going to fray, you're going to want to sew a zigzag stitch right next to the stitches you just made around the stocking body. Trim the seam allowance down to the edge of the zigzag stitches, or if you did not do zigzag stitches, trim the seam allowance down to 1/4 inch. Turn the stocking right side out and use an iron to press the edges. This will help it keep its shape. Take the cuff piece and fold it in half with short ends meeting. Pin together and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The cuff piece will now be a tube. Trim the seam allowance down to 1/4 inch and fold the cuff piece in half with wrong sides together. Long sides will meet to align raw edges. Find quarter points of the folded cuff by marking the seam with a pin. Then mark the side opposite of the seam with a pin. Fold the cuff in half so the two marker pins are stacked on each other. The crease is the quarter point, so put a pin on each of the creases on both sides. You should have a total of 4 pins spread evenly around the cuff now. Find quarter points of the main stocking in the same way you did for the cuff. Set the main stocking and cuff piece aside and grab the tab piece. Fold the tab piece in half, right sides together with long edges meeting. Sew down the tab side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving the ends open to make a tube. Use a safety pin or a turning tool to turn the tab right side out. Iron the tab with the seam allowance on the back side of the tab. Now you're going to fold the tab piece in half so raw edges meet. Place it inside the main stocking piece upside down. Line the folded tab piece up with the seam on the back side of the main stocking piece. Pin them together. Put the cuff piece inside the main stocking piece upside down. Match up the quarter points and raw edges. Pin them together. I usually like to align my seams here. The tab piece will now be sandwiched between the cuff and the main stocking piece on the inside. Sew the cuff to the main stocking piece using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Be careful when sewing over the tab piece because there's a lot of fabric in the machine at this point, and you may need to use the hand wheel on your machine to get through this section. Pull the cuff out of the main stocking piece and fold it over to the outside. The stocking is now finished. If you wanted to personalize it, you could always add a name with vinyl or fabric paint or embroidery if you have an embroidery machine. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I will catch you in the next video.